On Friday afternoon in the House of Commons, Sean Fraser, the man who destroyed Canada's immigration system and is now somehow overseeing law enforcement in this country, wildly incompetent, introduced Bill C-9, the so-called Combating Hate Act. This is the most extreme attack on free speech, in my opinion, in Canada's history. It's worse than Bill C-63, which Trudeau tried to pass but was then prorogued in government. Bill C-9, first and foremost, removes the Attorney General of Canada from any prosecution for so-called hate speech acts. It used to be that the Attorney General would need to approve the prosecution of any Canadian who was charged under hate speech laws. Bill C-9 totally removes the AG from having any involvement in any prosecutions. So it's much more direct and much easier to prosecute anybody for so-called hate crimes. Now, let's be clear. When the Liberal Party of Canada says that they are going to be going after hate speech, what they mean by that is speech that they hate. If you are a Canadian who believes that a man cannot become a woman and a woman cannot become a man, you are going to be targeted. If you are a Canadian who believes that immigration has been an absolute disaster for our economy and must stop, you are going to be gone after. If you hold certain views on the conflict in the Middle East, on the conflict in Ukraine, that do not align with the Canadian government's viewpoint, you are going to be gone after. Now, there's no doubt anybody who's been living in Canada for the past 2.5 years has seen the red carpet rolled out for so-called pro-Palestinian protesters in our streets. These are people shouting the most vile things you've ever heard out of loudspeakers. Fake body bags, fake blood on their hands, masked, can't see their face whatsoever. And I've seen these up close and personal. There's been essentially no reaction whatsoever from police. We saw yesterday up on Parliament Hill, right outside of Mark Carney's house, Palestinian messaging being painted onto the ground in front of our Parliament building. Can you imagine during the Freedom Convoy how many people would have been trampled by horses had there been any painting on the ground back then? But these hate speech laws, now under C-9, we would see the expansion of the definition of hate to include so-called fomenting detestation and vilification. And under these hate speech laws, in a country where men who essay young children frequently are released within 12 months to go essay new children, where I personally know people who have been hit by somebody who was driving drunk and they were out on the road again, never in prison. It would now allow somebody to be imprisoned for life if convicted of so-called fomenting detestation and vilification. This is communism 101. They don't go after. Our government is now setting up a society where the people who are on our streets every day committing crimes, and if you live in Canada, you know definitively that our streets have gotten so much worse. It's shocking how bad our streets have gotten. The amount of open crack smoking and violence in our downtown cores. I live a couple blocks away from Parliament Hill, and it's a dystopia. It's a dystopia. I'm not exaggerating. It feels like you're Dawn of the Dead. 2 blocks away from Parliament. They don't go after the criminals who are actually on our streets committing crimes, and they want to go after critics of the government. That's what this is formulated to do. Moose on the loose, all the big conservative Canadian YouTube channels, it's disgusting, but they're going to be gone after. I can tell you assuredly, it's not about going after hate speech. It's about going after speech that does not ideologically align with Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Sean Fraser, Stephen Golbo, and these people are far left-wing extremists. Far left-wing extremists. If your speech does not match their ideology, they don't want you to be able to talk. They don't want you to be able to talk. It's undoubted at this point. They want to create something called a Digital Safety Commission featuring 10 unelected bureaucrats. Great, just what we need more of in Canada, more unelected bureaucrats, and an ombudsman who will have the capability to put you under house arrest, give you an ankle bracelet, and confiscate any weapons you may have. Not for anything that you've said, but for another citizen reporting that they believe you are likely to say something hateful in the future. I kid you not. If Orwell were to look at Bill C-9, he would say to himself, no, this is too extreme. This is Orwell on steroids. What they're attempting to do is to weaponize the death of Charlie Kirk to implement these hate speech laws. But it's so hypocritical because we all know nobody on the right is cheering on anybody getting assassinated, anybody getting killed. All that disgusting, violent rhetoric is coming from the left. And the left, it's so funny too, because the left, you didn't see them make a peep when Don Cherry was canceled for speaking the truth years ago, a true Canadian hero. But now they're going to weaponize this moment, despite the fact that anybody who follows politics closely knows that the extremely violent rhetoric always comes from the far left types. Anybody who has been out to these Palestinian protests or any of these so-called anti-fascist protests knows how off their rocker disturbed the vast majority of these people are. Whereas if you've been at pro-Canadian rallies, in almost every case, it's a joyous, happy group of people who aren't looking to do any damage. Funny how that works, eh? Funny how the far left, the so-called tolerant left, tend to be the off-their-rocker, violent whack jobs, whereas the ones that they attempt to paint as extremists and far right tend to be very happy people who are just patriotic and want to save their country. But this bill, the so-called Combating Hate Act, Bill C-9, cannot be allowed to pass. This bill would mark the end of the guarantee of free speech in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and also permanently quiet dissent. If you thought that state broadcasting was bad before with CBC, CTV acting as rubber stamps, total mouthpieces for the Canadian government, the other options that are out there for you are going to be totally gone if Bill C-9 is passed. And they're trying to ram this thing through quickly. Sean Fraser's done ruining our immigration system. Now he's here to totally destroy the right to free speech in Canada. Please share this message far and wide. Bill C-9, the so-called Combating Hate Act, absolutely must be stopped. Share this with all your friends. Please write your MPs. Tell them this is unacceptable. Like, share, join. If you want to hit that join button, become a member, support me. It'd be much appreciated. If you're watching on TikTok, make sure you're following on YouTube. youtube.com/@FightForCanada 2025, because I'm over 18k followers and the Canadian government is not a big fan of distance. We can do this, Canada. We have to shut Bill C-9 down.